Bienvenidos a la clase de Photoshop para sonos de alta velocidad. Or this is going to be a little demonstration for using Photoshop with ultrasound. Okay, you're welcome to come to the beach with me, but let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's go ahead and take a look here at an image. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And so I'm opening it up through Bridge, but I'm opening it into Photoshop. The first thing is, if you have not a lot of background with Photoshop, please first watch the tutorial about basic introduction to Photoshop that I have. We'll post that in a place that it's easy for you to get to. That will help. So the first thing I want to talk about was this image is first, it's not particularly big. So if we go under image size, we will get the image size window here. And it looks kind of big, 20 by 15 inches at a resolution of 72 pixels per inch. But if we'd like to print this out, we will need to increase that to 200. So another way to imagine this is we undo resample, which means that whatever we do here, it's not going to make up any pixels or delete any pixels. It's going to keep everything the same actual image size. So I'm going to change my resolution from 72 pixels per inch to 200, because that's a good round number for printing an image out. And you can see that my image size here is now just 7 by 5, so a little 5 by 7. So if we wanted to increase that in size, you could do that. I just want you to be just aware that these are overall low resolution. You can look at the pixel dimensions up here as well, or you can actually switch this over to pixels once when we have resample back on. You can switch that over to pixels so you can see what it's at. I'm going to keep it there. Now, here is an ultrasound image, and one of the things that I want to show you is I'd like to talk about how we could alter or add some false color to this. So one way is very easy. You can come down here into the layers panel, and at the bottom of it, there's going to be some little buttons, and one of them is this little circle that's half clear and half white. And all of these are called adjustment layers, and I'm going to just do a hue saturation adjustment. I'll get back to layers in a moment, but for now, it's handy to have this as a layer as opposed to just something that's baked into the pixels. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to hit colorize. When I hit colorize, you can see that all of a sudden my images turn a different color. And the hue is really what's going to determine that. So the hue, you have a spectrum here, so you could change it to whatever color you want. Maybe we'll do something really blue, like kind of tealish, cyan color, something like that. And if we want to increase the intensity of that, we can, of course, increase the saturation, and that'll make it more vivid. We can also adjust brightness here too. So if we want to change our brightness or want it to really be super cyan, you could do something very different like that. So a lot of possibilities in here. If you unhit colorize, you'll get a little bit of adjustment to things that are colored, but since this is a monochromatic image, you really need to colorize in order to make that work. So I'm going to go ahead and this is my little properties box, but I'm going to put that right, I guess right there. So close that up so you can see everything again. Now, these layers, I made this on an adjustment layer, which is nice, which means that there's little eyeballs, and the eyeballs indicate that it's on or off. So if I click on the eyeball, I turn it off and get back to my original, right? So if I decided I don't like this whole layer here, I can just turn it off and also highlight it. You can see I've highlighted it now, and I can hit the trash can, and it will ask me if I want to, actually it's asking me if I want to delete a particular part of it. So now if I delete it, it will ask me if I want to delete the layer. If it's problematic, you can always just go ahead and hit the delete key on your computer, and eventually it will delete. So now another way we could add false color to this is, of course, we could paint on it. We could use a brush, and we could down here on my foreground color, my background color. So I could click on my foreground color, and I could get a red, and I could just start to paint on it. Now, probably not that creative unless you're really good with your drawing skills, but you can adjust anytime. There's a lot of tools over here on the left-hand side, and I selected the brush. You'll get menu up here. So you can change, say, the opacity of the brush down to, say, like 30%. And now, and you can also change, like, say, the size of the brush up here, some other types of brush shapes and all of that. But now you can see that we actually have a very different quality. So if I wanted to, I could actually use this to actually color in, let's say, part of this whole picture. And there's opacity to it, but there's kind of some complications with using it, which you can see. So if I have overlap, then that's going to add into the opacity. So also notice that I'm doing this right on top of the actual image layer. And notice I can't turn off my background layer even if I try. So the background layer by default has a little lock icon, meaning there's certain things you can't do to it. So if you want to get rid of that restriction, or anytime it says locked, you can double click on it. We'll say new layer, which is funny, but it renames it layer 0, and now it's not locked. So I can turn this off and on. But my other point is that I've been working directly onto the image. So if you didn't want to do that, we can go back just a couple steps here. And I can, instead of doing that, I can come down here to this plus square, and I can make a new layer. And then I could use my brush tool directly on that layer. And if I decided I did something I didn't like, I could just turn that layer off, or in fact, delete it. The last way that you could, well, there's probably many more ways, but the last way I will show you that you can adjust your image color is to go up to image and mode. And here, there are different color modes, and one of them is called indexed color. When you do that, you will get this little window, and this allows you to make adjustments to your image in a more manual way. So what I mean by this is you'll just have to play with this, and this is called indexed color, and so you could probably do a Google search and find ways to use it. You might find some interesting webinars or tutorials on YouTube or something. So, but I'm just going to show you, here is looking a bit more classic, but I can change this to custom. And when I do that, I open up this other window, and it has a bunch of colors. And this is sort of like a color palette that the image pulls from in order to generate the imagery. So if I wanted to sort of turn this into a different set of colors, I would need to come in, and I can, if I hold down my command key, I can get rid of some of these colors. But I can also come in and click on them and add any color I want into this. So if I wanted like one red, I could come here and click on it. Oops, click here, and then I would have red. And once you've made a palette, it's helpful to hit save and then name it. So I'm just going to call this green, red, save. And you can click OK now, but now what you need to do is actually come up here where it says palette, you'd come to custom, and it will open a palette, and this will show you all the colors that it's using to generate this image, including the ones I selected. But if I go to load and find my color table that I saved, it'll come back to just those colors. And if I click OK, it'll now force that it'll take all the imagery and the different tones and colors, and it will compress it into those, in this case, only 6 colors that I gave it. So you can get some really wild things here, especially if you use fewer colors. So you might mess around with, somewhere between 4 and 24 colors or something like that, and custom colors that you do and see what happens. You'll just have to play around with that and see what you can get. Okay, let's find a new image to open. Maybe come up here, and I'm going to try this feather, and let's make this a bit bigger. So one thing is we've kind of got this image within an image, right? And if we want to get rid of some of this background, the easiest way we could do it is to use the crop tool. We could come in here and click crop, and then just drag with our mouse the size we want. Double click on it, and then there you've got your image, and you've removed all the stuff around it. However, let's say you've got one of these images over here, and you kind of like, you like some of what's going on here, but you don't like everything. How could you get rid of it? Well, obviously this top, if I didn't want this blue top, I could just kind of come down and that might be a real easy way to do that. Likewise with this bottom over here, or if I didn't, something like that. But if there's some other things that I'd like to get rid of, there is an eraser tool. And the eraser tool is pretty nice. Obviously it will erase your image. I'd like to show you a couple things. One is that the foreground and background color, if you put a white in the foreground color, it will actually erase to black. It's a bit confusing, but if you put black in the foreground color and white in the background will erase, it'll erase to the background of white. So this kind of actually shows you, like, if you have black in the background, then you can just, since all these images start out as pure black, the way they come out of the machine, you can come in and you can just erase parts of the image that you're not interested in, like this. So you can kind of get rid of some, if you didn't like this S up here, you found that difficult, you can remember I'm using, it has a size of its eraser too. So you can adjust that up here, and you'll find all its subtle different variations of that tool up at the top. You can adjust the size to your liking, like this. Or if you can, the quick keys are the next to the P key on the keyboard, the bracket keys, you can get rid of things. So you're welcome to do that. Remember, there's undo if you undo a little bit. But I just wanted to point that out. So if you wanted to make some subtle changes that way, the eraser tool is a really quick and easy way to do that, and allows you to have a lot of control. Another thing that's very useful is for us to be able to control contrast and brightness. So we can go back down here and make all these are adjustments that we can do to our image layer, and it'll come in as a new layer, so we can get rid of it, turn it on and off to our liking. So what we can do is a brightness contrast adjustment, and you can just increase the brightness like this. You can increase the contrast, so you can make some adjustments that way. Another adjustment that's fun is to do the invert. Now, invert will turn everything into a negative. So this might be really dramatic and interesting, because all of a sudden now you have something that looks a lot less similar to the way we think of an ultrasound, which could be really fascinating to explore. And you're welcome to try some of these different effects. There's gradients and patterns, and you could pull a gradient in an interesting way. You can see right now what I have is a white to transparent gradient. So at the bottom, it's kind of getting a fade out. There's all different kinds of gradients. Some of them you probably, well, you could just have at it, but you may want some of the basics, like something that's has transparency in it. Because if you don't, then it's just going to cover up the image. But there are many possibilities with this. Although not quite as many as I wish, but it's a more complex tool, but we don't have time to get into it. So a couple other additional ways that you can edit your images.